Welcome to episode 4 of Songwriting Tips and Chats with Nick Vulture. And I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm on the lands of the Kaurna people in Adelaide, South Australia, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Today's episode is not going to be for everyone. It's probably more for those songwriters who are really new to songwriting. But if you are more experienced than that, maybe listen in anyway, because there may be something in it still for you. Today's episode is going to be around song structure, and I'm going to stick to 3 very basic examples of song structures, and then I'll have a little bonus tip at the end of the episode. So song structure is important to weave your story, to share your story in a way that connects with an audience. So knowing how you're going to structure up that story is important. And so I'm going to talk through some ways of doing that now. The first one is a very simple, basic song structure, which is essentially a verse and a chorus, and then a verse and a chorus, and a verse and a chorus, just repeated. Very simple song structure. The difference between a verse and a chorus is that each verse has usually different wording, different lyrics, whereas the chorus will often repeat the lyrics in each chorus. Also, usually, but not always, but usually, the verse and chorus rhythm or chord structure is different as well. So, for example, your verse might be E, A, B, E, A, B, E, A, B. And then when you shift to the chorus, it might change to say just C and A minor, or C and D, or something like that. So there's a change in the number of chords often, not always, but often, and also the chords that you're playing, and the rhythm slightly changes as well. But remember, the chorus is the constant. It's the repeated part of the song, usually, under this very simple structure, whereas the verse changes each time, as in the lyrics. The chords may be the same, the rhythm is the same, but the lyrics will change each time. So that's the difference between the verse and the chorus. So a simple song structure would be to have a verse, start with a verse, then a chorus, then a verse, then a chorus, then a verse and a chorus, finish. Okay? That's a very simple song structure. You may even finish on a verse as well. Now, when I said that the verses are usually different lyrically, I'm going to come back to that at the end for my bonus tip. Okay, so remember that, keep that in mind. That's the first example of a very, very simple song structure. Now I'm going to vary that slightly and give it a bit more complexity, and I'm going to introduce the bridge into that structure. And so that might look like this. Verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, finish. Okay? So the bridge, the difference here is that the bridge is a completely different sounding rhythm, and a completely, with that, a different style of lyrical content, something a bit out there, something a bit different that you throw in there lyrically to get the listener thinking about the song, but also it's really just a way of breaking up the song. Okay, so it doesn't sound too repetitive. That's essentially what a bridge does. Hence the name bridge. It bridges, it breaks the song and bridges one part of the song with the next part of the song. So usually one bridge in a song is enough. Some songs have a couple. I personally just stick with one. I think that is a nice, easy format to follow, and it's just a nice way of breaking the song. You don't need to do one of these styles all the time that I've just mentioned, the two examples I've given. You can change it up each time. I think it's good to change it up. You may have a few songs that are just verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, and you may have a few songs that are verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, etc. So I think it's good to structure them up differently between each song. Now, the third example that I'm going to talk about, and the final example, which is one that I don't really use, to be honest, all that much. Or in fact, I don't know that I've ever used it. But you can have a rolling narrative. I'm not sure how else to describe it, but a song that rolls on. So the same rhythm and chord pattern and words that don't come back to a chorus and don't repeat the verse. It's just a continual flow of a narrative. And I guess the thinking behind that style of songwriting is that it's a bit more challenging for the listener. It engages the listener because of the fact that it is a little bit more challenging. Yeah, it's sort of, I guess, a little bit like beat poetry in that it's just a consistent rolling narrative of storytelling. So it is a style of poetry, and it's a style of songwriting. But it's not one that I've used, but I think it's a very challenging way of writing a song. But if done well, it can be very engaging and a very powerful tool. So these are three examples of songwriting structures that I want to share with you. And as I've said, if you have already written a number of songs and you're just looking to improve how you write your songs, you may already know these three patterns of songwriting. But if you haven't written songs before, I think it's really important. I've spent a lot of time in the first three episodes talking about how to build your story, how to build the content of your song. But I thought it was important. We don't want to ignore the fundamentals of songwriting, and one of the fundamentals is how to structure up the song. So let me go back to the first one again, just to recap: verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Now, probably what I didn't mention in there is that the verse and the chorus, although I did mention that they're different in, say, the chord structure and the chord pattern, it's probably also good to remember that they're also probably different, usually different, in the number of lines of the rhythm and of the singing. So, for example, a verse may have 4 lines and a chorus may have 2 lines, or a verse may have 4 lines and a chorus may have 3 lines, or something like that. Usually they differ, not always. You may go 4 and 4, or you may go 6 and 6. That would be unusual. But you may do them the same, so the number of lines. But remember, you're trying to keep the listener engaged. So you need to break up patterns. You need to break up the way the story's being told so that the listener stays engaged as well. So it's important to remember that, sometimes this involves how you structure the song. Not just what you're saying, but how you structure the song is really important to how you engage the listener in your song. So that's the verse, chorus. Usually different chord pattern and a different number of lines between the two, between the verse and the chorus. The second one, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. Again, the verse, chorus would be similar to the first example, where there is a difference between the number of lines and a difference in the chord structure and rhythm between the verse and the chorus. And then the bridge is different again. So you might have 4 lines for the verse, 2 lines for the chorus, 4/2, 4/2, etc. And then a bridge might come in and just be 1 line, or it might be 6 lines or something. I mean, you may for your bridge do the same number of lines as your chorus, but you've just got a totally different rhythm and a different chord pattern just to change it up. There's no set rule on that, but just remember the idea behind all of these elements of the song is to vary the way the song sounds. And you need to vary the way the song sounds so that the listener stays engaged. In saying that, my third example doesn't really vary the way the song sounds, and it can be more challenging for that reason. So that is the rolling narrative song structure, the song that just keeps going and going and going in the form of, like I say, beat poetry, you know. So when I say it's more challenging, it's harder to do. It's harder to remember the song because there's no hook to come back to, like the chorus, for example, that helps you remember the words. And also it's just a bit more challenging for the listener because there is no break, there's no change, there's nothing sort of that breaks up the song for them. And so you really have to be telling a good story to make that one work. Like I say, it's not one I've used, but songwriters do use it. And if done well, can be a very interesting way of writing a song. Now, I mentioned at the start of this is going to be quite a short episode today because this is about the basics of songwriting and song structure that I don't think needs too much focus, but it needs to be talked about. So it needed its own episode, but just a short one. But here's my bonus tip. I mentioned before with the first and the second example that the difference between a verse and a chorus is that, or one of the differences is that the lyrical content of the verse changes verse by verse, right? So what you say in each verse is different, right? So you're building the story, and then the chorus is the solid sort of grounding of the song that you come back to that usually repeats, right? The chorus is the same each time, word-wise. The verses are different each time. But here's a little trick that I use, and I think maybe sometimes I overuse it, but that's because I find it effective. And that is that your first verse, what you're saying lyrically in your first verse, instead of finishing the song on a chorus, you may finish on a verse where you repeat the lyrical content of the first verse. Okay, so you may have verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, and then finish on a verse that repeats the first verse. Or a slight variation to that is it may repeat most of the first verse, but you change something slightly. And you change that slightly because it's almost like you've started the story, you've developed the story, you come back to how you started the story and realise there's a little variation in your story that you didn't mention, for example, right? So you may repeat it completely, the first verse, or you may repeat it mostly and then slightly change it. Yeah, that's a really good little hook. It's a good way of engaging the audience when they're hearing the story and they sort of subconsciously think to themselves, wow, that I get that. I get how that story unfolded and came back to how it started. Really, it's a really effective tool for songwriting. Don't forget it. It can be very useful. So, apply these song structures. They're the very simple, basic ones, although the third one, the rolling one, isn't so simple. But the first two are very fundamental, essential tools in songwriting, how to structure up a song. The first 3 episodes, we've talked about how to build the story, and I'm going to continue that in future episodes. But it's important not to overlook song structure. So that's it from me today. A very short episode today. Song structure. Don't overlook it. Very important. Have fun with your songwriting, and we'll speak soon. I'm Nick Vulture.